Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be looking at landscape today, a way to integrate the specific tool inside of Unreal for creating large organic surfaces. So the way we access our landscape tool is by going to our mode selection here. We're going to go down to landscape or press Shift 2. And you'll see that this will create a template for us of a grid that looks like a plane right now. So what we're going to be doing in our default settings here is going to be determining how large of a space we want. So the idea of how big this thing is can get pretty large, right? So if I try to look around, you can see this goes well off into the horizon of anything that I would expect the player to be able to navigate, and I can have multiples of these per level. But we want to be able to potentially manage that into a smaller representation so that we can look at the entirety of what we're building and possibly scale it down to represent a theoretical lawn for a yard or something like that, something a little bit smaller. So once we get the size that we want, we can go and click Create. When I click Create, it applies the BSP material, but it's very important to note that this is not a static mesh. This world grid material that we have here, if I look at this, I can switch to my wireframe view with Alt-2. So this view, you can kind of see the mesh deforming in real time. One of the optimizations of landscape is that it will adjust its fidelity based off of the proximity of the player, and you can configure how it does that. But as I zoom out, you can see that it's starting to organize the details into smaller and smaller pieces of grid. And so while the material is going to stay the same on this, the material is being drawn onto simpler and simpler distant geometry. Another big difference with this type of geometry to a mesh is that in a mesh, the vertices can move in any direction. And in the landscape type item, they can only move up or down. So the distances between verts is based off of their horizontal set distance by the grid and then the vertical displacement that you apply to them. So if we're going to go back into our landscape mode, we can see this in action. We have our manage tab over here to be able to import, generate new, use spline deformations or blueprints to deform the landscape, which there's a lot of powerful tools in there. But being an introduction, we're just going to go over to the sculpt tab real quick. Inside of Sculpt, we have the ability to sculpt, erase, smooth, and this will allow us to push and pull the geometry up and down. So if I come over to Sculpt and I have my brush set to, we'll set to the default size, 2048, and a tool strength of 0.3, when I click on it and I hold it down, it's going to raise up what's underneath my cursor based off of the strength of the object. And then you can see the concentric circles here. The interior circle is going to be the full strength, and then you have fall off between the inside and the outside. If I adjust the fall off to be 1, then the whole thing is going to be soft, creating more gentle mounds. And if I make it fully rigid, then it'll create very strict surfaces. You can adjust the brush size once you're in the tool by using the bracket keys, bumping it up and down as needed. And of course, you can edit it manually over here by entering a number or sliding it up and down. In addition to the sculpt brush, we have the ability to erase. So erase, basically all this information is being stored in a height map where the base level is a middle gray, and then the top level that you have is white, and the very bottom that you would have is going to be black. And so erase is just going to return it back to a gray value if you wanted to erase that. With the sculpt tool, I can both raise the terrain by clicking and holding, or I can lower it by holding shift while I click, and then I can create trenches as well. With that, I might find that I create some harsh edges that require a little bit more attention to make them look appropriate, because you can see there's a bit of tearing inside the material here. So I can go to smooth, and that'll try to soften up the edges to give a more uniform displacement. If I go back to my wireframe view, you can see here the vertices are shifted up and down, but the horizontal displacement is the same between them, whether or not they're up and down or not. So you kind of get these rows and columns. And so when you think about your geometry, just always be thinking that you're stretching edges and verts apart from each other, and you want to make sure your materials are reflected appropriately and that you're not abusing the work of an artist. We can flatten. So flatten allows us to grab a particular height underneath my cursor, and that will take the geometry and bring it up or down so it'll fit to that elevation. So you can have whatever you want to set up in the natural world, and then you can flatten out to create a base to add foundation for a building or something like that. There's ramps that you can add. And so if you wanted to, you can have the ramp here. And when you say add ramp, then you can just take the whole ramp and set the same elevation somewhere else and add the ramp, or offset the base. And so ramp's a pretty fun tool. You can apply erosion. So depending on the degree that you do it, you can try to create some natural effect to the landscape over time. How would this look if wind or weather had hit it? hydro deformation effects, right? Rain over time. And there's a bunch of different things that you can add in here. You know, you don't want a completely flat surface, so add some noise as you go in there, and then it'll be varied without having to put in the hand details. You'll notice that the terrain is shifting a little bit as I go in and out, not just for optimization, but actually transforming the surface. The way that we want to control for that is we want to go to our LODs for the terrain, and you want to change the max LOD level to 0 if this is an absolutely critical terrain, and you'll notice that the LOD isn't popping up and down anymore. If I change it back to -1 where it's optimizing for the object based off of the distance and the configuration we have for the project. So 0 is a good thing to have if you want it to be constant, so that doesn't change on you as you're walking around. All right, past the sculpt, we have the ability to paint. Paint is going to require we have some other resources. We'll look at that in another video, but the idea that you have this terrain and you could add materials to it, we have the option to add landscape material. So whatever we have here, if we had the basic shape material, this is going to change it to white. So you can have a uniform tiling material that'll apply to this. We'll show you in a little bit how to make a material that you can paint different materials onto the surface. But this will give you the opportunity to have the terrain built out, and the terrain should be used by nav mesh inherently. And then if you want, once you're in game, this will have collision on it, assuming that the player character spawns above it. Should have, let's see here, if I can get to their point, should have the collision that's necessary to play the game. So once you step onto it, you can walk around without having to do anything with collision, because the terrain is designed to be used by characters from a default configuration. So check it out, play around with it, see what kind of things you can build. There's a lot of ways to expand on this, but this is the basics for terrain. Hopefully it lets you go out there and keep building.